Good morning. Today is December 12th, 2002. We're at the home of Mr. Dick Veasey, who also goes by the name of Dick. My name is Brad Hoops. I am the interviewer for the Haverhill Veterans Oral History Project. Good morning, Mr. Veasey.
Good morning.
Let's start the interview. If you can tell us when and where you were born.
I was born right here in Haverhill, and I believe I was born in the Hale Hospital, I think.
And what was the date?
The old Hale Hospital on Buttonwoods Avenue. And I was born on March 30th, 1925.
25. And can you give us, briefly tell us what you were doing prior to entering the service?
Well, I was a student at Governor Dummer Academy right down the road here in South Byfield. I was a junior at the time of Pearl Harbor in 1941. I just started my junior year.
Junior year in high school, correct?
Yeah, that's equivalent to high school. Yes.
Okay, yes. Do you remember where you were and what you were thinking
yes,
when Pearl Harbor hit?
I sure do. I was out on the one of the athletic fields. It was on a Sunday, obviously. We had a gathering for guests and visitors, etc. And one of my guests who was there that day was a man I'd gone to summer school with. He ran the summer school. His name was Ed Malcolm. He was in the Army. He had just been drafted, I guess. But he showed up for the tea and crumpets there at Governor Dummer that Sunday morning. And after he left, we got word that Pearl Harbor had been bombed. I remember it very, very distinctly.
What were you thinking? What were people thinking at that point?
Well, in the first place, we didn't know where Pearl Harbor was, never heard of it. I don't think we gave it much thought other than the fact that obviously the United States had been attacked, and this probably meant war. But to me, I was 17 years old, I really didn't give it much of a thought because I was too young to go at that particular moment.
Okay, so obviously you were too young to go. When then did you enter the service, and did you enlist or were you drafted? Can you tell us the story behind that?
Yeah, the government enabled you to continue your education until you were 18 and graduate if you were in school. And I was in school, so I was deferred on my birthday in March. When I turned 18, I was deferred until I graduated, which was at the end of May, as I recall it. And then I was given 2 hours to report to my draft board up in Haverhill. Since Governor Dummer is right down the road here, I could make that all right. And I asked for a deferment because I had been accepted at the United States Merchant Marine Academy, and I had not been given a date that I would report. And they did defer me.
Okay. And then eventually, after your deferment, did you enlist, or was there a time frame when you had to report?
Well, no. My deferment lasted until I went to the Merchant Marine Academy, which was in July, as I recall it, about a month later, approximately. I was at the Merchant Marine Academy. And I stayed there for about 6 months, of which 3 of those months were spent at sea on a tanker. And I made 2 trips to Venezuela through German-infested U-boat waters.
Oh my!
At that particular time, I was 18 years old.
And if I remember from prior conversations, you had no support as far as protection. It was you were sitting ducks out there, correct?
That's right. That's right. They had no guns on the tankers that I was on. And we had one very unusual experience when we left Venezuela on one of the trips to go back north again, filled up with oil that we picked up down there. We stopped in Aruba, and Aruba is a Dutch colony in the Caribbean. And when we stopped there, we were told by the people on the shore that the night before a German U-boat had been in and filled up with oil.
Oh my! Oh wow! So what was going through your minds and those of your fellow seamen that you're sitting here riding on basically a floating powder keg?
That's right. That's right.
Was there any? Did you even have time to think about that, or?
Oh yeah. Well, we gave it a lot of thought. At least I did. this guy could be sitting right offshore there
Wow.
waiting for us to get out of there.
Amazing.
And one of the reasons I think they did that was that the Germans, of course, had overrun Holland.
Correct.
And Holland owned Aruba. And I guess that's the way they did it. I'm not too sure.
Okay, so now you're in the Merchant Marines Academy, and when did you finally officially join the service or into the?
Okay, I left the academy. I was still down aboard that tanker, by the way, when I resigned. And I'd come back on the second trip. And I resigned, and of course that made me eligible for the draft. And of course they picked me up within a month, and rightly so. I was then, so I was still 18, I guess. But anyway, I went into the Navy. When you were drafted, by the way, you had your choice of picking one or the other. And if you had a good reason to join the Navy, they let you go and join the Navy. Of course, I had a good reason because I'd been to sea and everything else. So I did. I joined the Navy.
Okay, and do you remember the day you left here, Haverhill,
Yes,
to
I
go
do,
off?
very much so. Yeah, I went down, and as I recall, it went by bus, and I don't know why, but there were a bunch of us that went, and we went to Sampson, New York, on the bus, and I remember it very clearly because a man that I met there at the bus station where we all met was a man by the name of Chase, Norman Chase. And they called him Sparky because he was a fireman here in Haverhill. And I remember Sparky, and later on he married a girl that we all knew at the Universalist Church. She was the secretary down there. Nice gal. Sparky married her later on.
Okay. Were there lots of friends and families to see you guys off?
Oh yes. Oh yes, everybody had their family there, yes.
I can't imagine what was going through, like your mother's thoughts. A great deal of sadness. Do you remember her?
No, I don't recall anything like that. They said goodbye and off we went.
I'll be darned. Okay, so you're off to the service. Where did you report for boot camp for your
Sampson,
initial
New
training?
York.
And
That was on Lake Seneca. Beautiful part of the country, by the way, out there, the Finger Lakes district of New York. And I went to boot camp there, and then I was selected to go to signal school right there at Sampson, New York, and I went there.
How were you chosen to go to signal school? Were
That's
you
a
given a
good
choice,
question.
or?
I really don't know.
Is that right?
They must have given us some tests of some sort and decided maybe that was my niche.
Okay, so you've gone through signal school now,
Yeah.
and if I remember you saying in an earlier conversation, you were the #1 in your class,
That's
correct?
right, that's right.
And from signal school now, where are you off to?
Okay, I was given my choice of duty, by the way, for graduating #1 in my class. That was one of the perks. I don't remember how many people were in a class. I'll take a guess around 50. And so I was given my choice of duty, and I could have picked a battleship or a carrier or a cruiser, a destroyer, you name it. Whatever I wanted, I could have had. However, I picked an LST because I knew it was a small ship, relatively small, and I wouldn't be stacked up in the cruise quarters, and I'd have much more chance to advance.
Can you explain to those watching the tape what an LST ship is?
Yeah, an LST is a landing ship tank, and it was the workhorse of the Navy in the Second World War. Without the LSTs, by the way, we never would have won the war.
Is that right?
You can have all the battleships in the world, but they're not going to put men on the shore. The LSTs put men on the shore.
As well as supplied men on the shore and ships as well. Is that correct? You handled supplies as well?
Oh yes,
Yeah.
oh yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all sorts of vehicles and personnel. We could go right up on the beach and open the bow doors, and the ramp came down and everybody got off.
I'll be
Or
darned.
one or two.
Okay, so you've chosen to go to an LST. I take it they assign you to the ship right away, or was there more advanced training?
We went to a amphibious training base down at Camp Bradford, Virginia, in the Norfolk area. I'll never forget that because I went ashore, that's what we call going on liberty, one day, and I went into the city of Norfolk, and there was a great big park there, big sign on the park, sailors and dogs keep off the grass.
Oh, geez.
That's the last that I ever went into Norfolk. I won't go in there today, by the way.
And then from Norfolk, where from there?
Okay, from there, as a crew, they formed our crew there.
Okay.
All the different elements, motor max and signalmen, quartermasters, and bosun mates, etc.
So at this point, you were moving around as an individual, and you weren't moving as a unit until you formed up in Norfolk?
Yeah, we went directly from, I went directly from signal school to Norfolk.
As an individual,
Yes,
correct?
as
Okay.
an individual,
Okay.
right. And down there, they formed the crew.
Okay.
And we then went up to Baltimore, Maryland, where we went aboard an actual LST for training. Not for very long, maybe about 2 or 3 days. And then from Baltimore, we went to Navy Pier in Chicago. Excuse me. And Navy Pier, we had the best liberties I ever enjoyed in the service. They were marvelous people in the city of Chicago. And whenever you went into the city, they picked up your tab for about everything. You never spent a nickel in Chicago.
I'll be darned.
Wonderful place. From Navy Pier, they sent us up to Great Lakes Naval Training Center, which was in the Chicago area. I don't recall exactly where, but it was right on the lake there. Couldn't have been very far out of Chicago. And that was for gunnery training. We had a funny experience there, I thought. We were all put on guns, and they had a airplane come by towing a sleeve, and one of our guys, instead of aiming at the sleeve, aimed at the plane. Why this plane didn't go down is beyond me. These guys who were flying these planes were taking the life in their hands. But anyway, he didn't shoot him down, fortunately, and we all survived that one.
Okay, and then on from Chicago, where...
From Chicago, we all boarded a train, went down to Louisville, Kentucky. We spent a very cold night sleeping on the floor of the YMCA in Louisville. I remember that very vividly. As a crew, we were all spread out all over the floor. And the next day, we crossed the Ohio River into Indiana. Jeffersonville is the city across the river from Louisville, Jeffersonville, Indiana. We crossed over there and we picked up our ship, which had just been launched and commissioned, brand new, and just floating for the first time. And aboard we went, and then they hauled us down the Ohio River by a tugboat. We didn't have the engines running. By a tugboat down the Ohio into the Mississippi, right on down to New Orleans, where the tugboat left us. And we had the rest of our ship finished off, so to speak. And we then went out into the Caribbean, no, not the Caribbean, I'm sorry, Gulf of Mexico, for a shakedown cruise. Went over to Panama City, Florida, I recall. And we got things pretty well squared away, although our captain was relieved because he was incompetent, and he was. And he was replaced by another man who was extremely competent. So everybody breathed a sigh of relief on that one.
It's good that they caught that there as opposed to in the midst of battle, I would suppose.
Pardon me?
I would imagine it was great that they found out he was incompetent at that point as opposed to...
That's why they had shakedown cruises. They could find out if anybody was incompetent. And he was terrible. He took the ship in one day, to one dock, I recall, and he didn't know enough to slow the ship down enough. And he ordered the lines put out as he came in, and the lines were secured to the dock and took the dock right away.
Oh, my.
He didn't know what he was doing, so that was the end of him, unfortunately.
I guess I'll move ahead a couple questions since we're on this topic. Now you've formed up in a crew and you got a new commander. You had respect for this commander, I take it.
It was a new one.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, very much so, yes.
And respect for all your, well, I guess you're getting to know each other, but respect we can move ahead, I guess, into your prior or future experience. You had respect for all your fellow seamen as well,
yes,
the whole
yes.
crew.
We're all the same, you know. We're
Yeah.
all young kids,
Yeah.
and yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't say we had respect for each other. We liked each other.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So now you've got a new commander. The crew's all put together. The ship's in shape. Where from there now?
Okay, went back to New Orleans to get the final touches at it, I guess. Then we went over to Mobile, Alabama, to pick up our cargo. Our cargo turned out to be ammunition. That made us a floating time bomb right there. We had no personnel or tanks or anything else, so we picked up just ammunition. We were crammed full of ammunition. And we then went directly to the Panama Canal, through the canal, out into the war zone in the Pacific.
How long did that take then from the point you loaded up and got to the war zone? What you remember the time?
Well, not very long, probably a week.
Oh, is that okay?
Oh, yeah, not very long. No.
And once again, you were probably callous to it since you'd had previous experiences sitting on a time bomb. But once again, were people in their minds thinking, you know, one torpedo and we
No, when you're 18 years old, you don't think of that. I don't know why. I sure would today, but we didn't even think twice about it.
I'll be darned. What were conditions like on the ship? Sleeping conditions, food. How were things like that?
I had no problem with any of them. Sleeping conditions were good. The food was good, I guess. I didn't eat much in those days. I weighed 135 pounds, and I was 5 feet 10 inches tall, so I was pretty skinny. But anyway, I liked the duty.
You were comfortable,
Oh, yeah.
got plenty of sleep and,
Oh,
and,
yeah.
and such?
Well, I didn't get plenty of sleep because we stood watch, you know, all the time. So
Okay. Okay, so now you arrive into the war zone. Where can you start, take us through a timetable of where and what you did there?
yep, we left Panama and started on a 6,000-mile trip to Eniwetok. Took us 30 days. LSTs did not go very fast, by the way. 8 or 9 knots was our top cruising speed. And took us 30 days to go 6,000 miles. What's that, 200 miles a day, I guess, or something like that. And we hit it right on the nose, thank God, because we hadn't seen anything except other ships from time to time passing us. But we had a 19-year-old quartermaster whose name was Soapy Lather. Soapy was his nickname, obviously, because his last name was Lather.
Yeah.
His real name was Wayne. But Soapy Lather was an excellent quartermaster. He's a first-class quartermaster. And the officers used to go out on the deck mornings to take their sightings on their sextants. And Soapy would accompany them, and he'd also take his. When they went back into the chart room, they'd all have different figures. They'd always take Soapy's, because Soapy was always right.
So 30 days to cross over. What did you guys do to entertain yourself or keep busy to pass the time?
You never entertained yourself. Some guys played poker all the time. I never played poker. I never played cards of any sort. So I really can't speak to that subject.
Did you have a lot of duties to keep yourself busy, or?
Oh yes. All day long we had to be up on the signal bridge, and we stood watch. One of us was on watch. That was 8 hours a day, and it varied every day. But you're always busy, always.
Okay. So after your 30-day journey, where did that land you then?
It took us to Eniwetok, which is in the Eniwetok, in the Marshalls, I believe. And then we went over to Guam and the Marianas. I may be confused here.
Okay.
One may be Marshalls and the other Marianas, but anyway, then from Guam we went to Ulithi, which was in the Caroline Islands. And at Ulithi we had a big beer bash, I recall that. We all went ashore, drank beer like crazy. And
Was that your first time ashore?
yeah, yes, I
up to
never
that
went
point?
ashore at Eniwetok or at Guam.
Oh my. And at this point, did you still have your cargo, or had you unloaded?
Oh no, the cargo stayed with us. And from Ulithi, we went directly north to Okinawa. And at Okinawa at that time, the greatest battle in the world was raging. As we approached Okinawa, I can never forget this, there was an LSM standing offshore, equipped with rocket firing devices. The entire side of the ship was lined with launches for rockets, and they were going off, probably 10 to a second. It was an awesome sight, because these things, you can see them explode on the island as they hit. And anybody over there is going to be blown to smithereens. I'll never forget that sight. It was in the early dawn. You couldn't miss it. Tracers, of course, were going up. Every few rockets had a tracer on it, so you could follow the flight of it. But we didn't stop at Okinawa. We kept on going about 10 miles off Okinawa to a group of islands called Karamaretto. Karamaretto was picked by our commanding people because of its location and its fine harbor to berth the support vessels of the operation. Since we were an ammunition ship, we were a support vessel, and we anchored there for the next 45 days, I believe it was. Now every day, Japanese kamikaze planes were coming over. There was a group of destroyers which ringed the island of Okinawa. They were called the picket line. The picket line, when they sighted planes coming from Japan, would radio in to all the other ships that they were on the way. So everybody got ready. One of the things that we did to get ready was to make smoke. Everybody at Karamaretto was equipped with a smoke-making device on the fantail, which is on the stern of the ship. When we got the word, we lit up the smoke pot. The whole harbor would be engulfed in a white smoke, very thick, by the way, in substance, white smoke. It obliterated us from sight of the enemy. It also obliterated our sight of the enemy. They'd come over, we could hear them, but we never saw them because of the smoke. Thank gosh, because they never bombed us or struck us, because they didn't know we were there. They knew we were there, but they didn't know where. You wouldn't have a guy come down through the smoke, take a chance of hitting somebody and just going into the water.
Right.
He would be sacrificing his plane and himself for nothing. So they didn't come down. It was a great idea, by the way.
But I remember, I think in our prior conversations, that there was one incident where you guys didn't get the smoke up, and
That's
you
right,
witnessed
that's
a
right,
kamikaze
that's right.
hit. Can you
Right.
tell us about that?
One plane, I don't know, he must have come in from another direction or something, because he was not detected by the picket line. And he came in, and I was on watch at the time, I'll never forget it, because this plane appeared, and I thought it was probably one of ours. I didn't know. I saw no markings on it. But anyway, this guy lazily went around like this, and the next thing I know, he went into a steep dive, and he hit the USS Curtis, which was a seaplane tender, anchored probably 500 or 600 yards off of where we were.
Oh my.
I watched it very clearly, and he struck it. Tremendous explosion when he hit. 30 men were killed outright. Another 30 were badly wounded. The Curtis, by the way, had survived Pearl Harbor. She was in Pearl Harbor at the time of the attack and was not hit. But here she was, really at the end of the war, being struck by a kamikaze at Okinawa.
I'll be darned. During your time over there, did you feel pressure or stress being in the war zone? And if you did, how did you deal with that?
No, I don't think we felt any stress, to tell you the truth. Again, when you're 18, 19 years old, it's always the other guy that's going to get killed. It's never you.
Yeah, yeah.
So I don't think we dealt with stress. I really don't.
Did you lose any of your crew in the war, or did you guys come through unscathed?
No, no, we were never hit, and so therefore we all came home.
Oh, that's super. Speaking of home, how did you keep in touch? Did you receive mail on a regular basis?
Oh yes, very much so. Yes, we sure did. I'm going to say probably once a week we received mail, and we sent mail. We had what was called, I think they called it V-mail in those days, and it was like a piece of paper you folded over, and you wrote on it, and you folded it over and put an address on it. I don't think we put a stamp on it, to tell you the truth. I can't remember buying stamps. So, and then it was sent off. And it was picked up, as I say, probably once a week. And we received mail promptly from the States.
And was it in a timely manner? I mean, as soon as someone wrote from the States, how much later would you get that? How?
Not too much later, maybe a week later or a
Is
couple
that
of
right?
weeks later. Oh yes, it was very timely.
How about the letters going home? Were your letters censored before they reached home, or?
Yes, they were. Yes, they were.
Were you?
They were censored on our ship.
Were
Our officers censored our mail. You were not allowed to say where you were, or anything about the enemy, or anything about your own location.
were these letters saved? Were you curious when you got home after the war to see what was censored? Was it
I
interesting?
have every one of them.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, so from Okinawa, or being perched off of Okinawa, continue on with your timeline.
Okay. When the Battle at Okinawa ended, as I recall it, around July 1st, 1945, we were sent to the Philippines. In the Philippines, a tremendous armada of ships was gathered for the imminent invasion of Japan. Since Okinawa was the last island up, the next step was into Japan. So we were down there, and you can't imagine the amount of tonnage and ships that was at Lady Gulf and all the other places down there waiting for the invasion. It was going to be a fantastic operation. However, we were all saved by Harry Truman. Harry Truman dropped the atomic bomb in August, and that finished off the Japs.
Do you remember that day as well? Can you remember that day?
Very much so, very much so. We were in Lady Gulf. We got word that an atomic bomb had been dropped. We didn't know what the atomic bomb was. And a couple of days later, word came out that the Japanese had surrendered because of this atomic bomb. The whole harbor erupted in absolute bedlam. Tremendous amounts of ships. Everybody fired off their rockets, their buried pistols, which were signal flares. Flag hoists were going up, horns were going off, fire hoses were spouting water. It was an awesome sight. Everybody was just tickled pink.
It must have been just a great sense of relief as well.
Absolutely.
Because the thought, you hear many reports about if the bomb had never been dropped and the invasion had gone through, that upwards of 1 million Americans
That's
would have
right.
been killed,
Absolutely.
and you would have been right there, probably in the thick of it.
That's right. We would have put our lives on the line on that one. Thank gosh for Harry Truman.
Okay, so the Japanese have now surrendered. Where to now? Where are you
Okay.
off to now?
From the Philippines, everybody followed their invasion route, except at this time we're carrying peacekeeping forces up to Japan, and we loaded up with a bunch of Army soldiers in a place called Batangas in the Philippines, and started on up to Japan. Now, as you came into Japan, it was an awesome sight because Mount Fujiyama appears before the island appears. And up in the sky, you saw the tip of Mount Fujiyama with the snow-capped mountain, and then just sort of haze below it, and then the horizon. It was a very unusual sight. But we went right directly to Tokyo Bay, where the surrender had been signed aboard the Missouri about 10, 12 days prior to this. And we came into Tokyo Bay, and I was amazed because I looked over at the city of Tokyo and Yokohama, its neighbor, and there was nothing standing. It was absolute rubble as far as the eye could see. Our bombing raids had just leveled the entire area there. It was awesome. Now the Emperor's Palace had never been hit, but we didn't see the Emperor's Palace. It must have been someplace over the horizon, I guess.
Was that, did you find out, was that something that the government made sure that didn't get bombed, or just by luck never got bombed?
No, I don't, the government saw through it and it was not
Okay.
bombed. No. That was part of the conditions of surrender, by the way, that the Emperor would stay on. So we were very conscious of the Emperor's status there in Japan.
Let me stop before you continue on your timeline and talk about this a second. Prior to, I guess, starting with Pearl Harbor and through your experience, what was your thoughts about the Japanese, the enemy, and then once the surrender, I don't know if you went to shore and met the local civilians, but what was your overall and your crewmates' thoughts?
I hated them, absolutely. I still do, by the way. I wouldn't buy a Japanese car if you gave it to me.
Okay, yeah, very understandable.
Well, when they take up 3 years of your life,
Sure.
you're not too happy with them.
Certainly, understandable. Okay, so you're now in Tokyo Harbor. You're dropping off the peacekeeping force. Did you guys just drop them off, or were you able to go to shore as well? Or
Well, some of the officers, I think, went ashore. I did not. I had no desire to go over and pick through the rubble, so I never went ashore.
okay, and after dropping off your cargo, the peacekeeping force,
Right.
where to now?
Okay, we hung around there for maybe a week. Then we went back to Okinawa to pick up more soldiers to bring back up to Japan. Now, when we reached Okinawa on this trip, we went through the most harrowing part of our entire life aboard LST 1097 because we got word when we got there that there was going to be a typhoon coming in, and we were to put to sea. And we all joined a flotilla, went out of Buckner Bay in a flotilla. We had no cargo, by the way, at that point. We had dropped off the rest of our ammunition in the Philippines long before, and we hadn't picked up any soldiers in Okinawa at that point. So we all went to sea, and the typhoon of the century hit us. It was an awesome experience. The wind speed reached 175 miles an hour. By the way, a hurricane here in Massachusetts, when we had it in 1938, I believe it was, wind speed was around 100 miles an hour. This is almost twice that. You know, we had walls of water, 75 feet high the waves were. And when you went up on watch, boy, you hung on to everything to get up on the con.
Were you tethered to the cone? I mean, could you easily have been washed out?
Oh gosh, it could have been blown over.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a harrowing ride. Our helmsman had an awful job trying to, in a typhoon, you have to keep the ship headed directly into the wind. If you don't, you'll broach. You can see what would happen going into the wind like this. If you went like this, your ship would just tip over at some point. So they had to keep this ship in this tremendous seas and awful wind, heading directly into the wind. They had a terrible time trying to do this, but they did it. Our guys were fantastic.
How long were you in this typhoon?
I'm going to say about 48 hours in the the height of the storm.
I'll be dying.
It was terrible.
I think you had mentioned too, talking about a ship, another ship that had been blown back.
That's
Can
right.
you tell that
That's
story?
One of the ships in our flotilla, must have been in our flotilla, reported that when the storm subsided, she was 25 miles back of where she started from. So therefore, with engines running full speed ahead, she had been pushed back 25 miles in a 48-hour period.
I'll be darned. Okay, so the typhoon breaks, and where are you off to now?
Okay, when the typhoon broke, we went back to Okinawa, back to Buckner Bay, and picked up the load of personnel, which we were going to, and took them up to a place called Sendai, which is on the island of Honshu, north of Tokyo. I don't know, probably 200 miles north of Tokyo. I'd never heard of Sendai before or since, but that's where we went. We dropped off the soldiers up there, and then we went back to Tokyo Bay, and then we started for what we thought was going to be home. We went down to Guam, we went to Tinian, I believe, and then we went to Pearl Harbor. And at Pearl Harbor, we're going to stop off and get maybe some more fuel, and then go on to the States. But that is not what happened. The ship was detained in Pearl Harbor. It was reassigned for other duty, and we lay up alongside a dock for months while construction workers boarded us every day to transform the ship into something else, I don't know what. But my points, of course in those days you had to have points to go home. My points were up in February, as I recall it, and we got to Pearl Harbor, by the way, in about the 1st of December.
This is December of 1945.
45,
Okay.
right. And in February of 46, my points were up. We were still sitting at the dock. But I was not sent home, I don't know why, until May, about the 1st of May. I was given orders to board a ocean-going tug. And the ocean-going tug was going to pull a houseboat to Panama. It took us 30 days to go from Pearl Harbor to Panama, where they let us off for some liberty for maybe 2 or 3 days. And then we all boarded the tug again. We left the houseboat there, thank God, and went up the coast of Mexico to San Pedro, I believe it's called, which is the port of Los Angeles. And there I finally got off after 16 months of being overseas. It was a very nice feeling.
I'll bet it was. So, but you're still in Los Angeles, and you got to cross the country.
That's right.
Tell that
And
story.
after a few days in Los Angeles, it's now in the 1st of June, or a little bit more, they put us on a cattle car troop train, which is it's an old railroad car that they had revamped, so to speak, by putting in bunks and things like that, 3 or 4 high. And we went across the country. It took us 7 days to go from Los Angeles to Boston. We were dropping off men all the way along the line. I finally got to Boston on the 19th day of June, 1946, and I got in early in the morning. They took me immediately over to the Fargo building in Boston and discharged me from the United States Navy.
I'll be darned. So how long from the time you boarded a bus here in Haverhill and got back to Haverhill, how long were you gone? How long were you in the service then?
When I left Haverhill, I mean to join the Navy.
Yeah, just your entire service overseas.
Oh, the entire service.
From the time you left for boot camp until you arrived back home.
Okay, I left for boot camp, I guess, in January of 44. So this is now June of 46, 2.5 years later, I guess, yeah.
And from Boston, you took the train or the bus back here to Haverhill, or?
No, my folks met me, and my father met me in Boston at the old Hotel Statler, which is still there, but not called that now. I forget now what it's called now. Became the Copley Plaza, I think, after that. But anyway, he met me there and drove me home.
What was the feeling? What were you thinking then to finally, after being gone,
What a relief.
being in the experiences you've gone through, and to finally pull into your driveway?
Absolutely. It was an incredible experience on one hand. As one of the Navy people later on said, I wouldn't take $1 million for the experience, but I wouldn't do it again if he gave me $1 million.
Was it hard leaving your crew after being? I think you had mentioned one time. I thought it was a very interesting comment that you bonded through adversity. You and your crew. Was it hard to leave? I know I'm sure there was great anticipation to get home, but at the same time, did you?
No, it was not tough to leave the crew.
Okay.
Not
okay.
at all.
And do you?
My loyalties to home were far
Oh, sure.
excessive of
Oh,
that.
fair enough. Do you remember getting home and say having one of your mom's home cooked meals or sleeping in your old bed again?
Oh,
Was
yes,
it?
it was marvelous, well, just wonderful.
Oh.
Wonderful.
Now, what did you do? Say the days or the weeks after that?
Well, I took the summer off. I didn't do anything. They gave us good mustering out pay, by the way, and I had a lot of money riding on the books because I never used it. I bought a brand new car for $1,500, top of the line Chevrolet convertible, and I had money left over, by the way. And I did nothing that summer because I was going to college in the fall. I had applied for college to go to Amherst College back in I guess February, let's say, of 1943, and in approximately February of 1946, when I was at Pearl Harbor, I wrote to the Dean of Admission at Amherst and asked him if that acceptance still stood 3 years later. He said, of course it did. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the fall.
I'll be
And
done.
that was wonderful news, and I went in the fall. 4 years later, I graduated.
Now, at that point, had the GI Bill been
Yes.
installed, and did you take
Yeah,
advantage
yes,
of that?
I took advantage of that, yes,
Okay.
yes.
And then after college, what you went on to a career? Can you tell us a little bit about your career?
Yeah, I started off in the advertising business over in New York City. That wasn't too good, except that I met my wife there, so I guess I was pretty good there. Then I came back to Haverhill, and I worked at the United Shoe Machinery Corporation down on Essex Street, and they transferred me eventually up to Manchester, New Hampshire. I stayed up there for about a year. We were married, by the way, at that point. And came back to Haverhill to take over the loan department at the Merrimack National Bank down on Merrimack Street. I stayed there for 8 years. I was now 37 years old. Time to go do it. And I did it. I left the bank, started my own business down in Jacksonville, Florida, which turned out to be a bonanza. And 20 years later I sold it, and I've done nothing ever since.
Oh, that's wonderful. How do you feel the war affected your life?
Oh, very much so. Very extremely so.
In any specific ways? Would you say it was obviously one of the major points in your
Absolutely.
life? Did it change your thinking about war or about?
Yeah, I don't relate it especially towards war, as I do more dealing with people. I think one of the things I learned was never trust anybody, nobody, except maybe your father and mother.
I see.
Not maybe, trust them. But nobody else, really.
Uh-huh. Now, do you still keep in touch with some of your old crew? Did you after the war?
Oh,
Or
yes. After the war, no. However, about 10 years ago right now, this is 2002, 1992, one of the fellows on the ship went out to find everybody to hold a reunion. He did a fantastic job. He found just about everybody. We all showed up in 1992 in Louisville, Kentucky for our first reunion. We've been having them ever since. We've had 10, I believe it is right now. Wonderful experiences every year. Very nostalgic, passionate. It's a wonderful feeling.
Oh, wow.
I wouldn't miss it.
Is there anything I haven't asked you, or any additional comments you would like to make that for people in the future that are viewing this as we close this interview? Was there anything that you would like to say or talk about that I hadn't
Well, the
asked
only
you?
thing is, I think that being a veteran of World War II, you're so proud of the fact that you served. It's a wonderful feeling that you put out for your country.
Excellent.
When I see people today that knock our country for one reason or another, I want to knock them. They don't know what it is to live in this country
Wow.
and to defend it.
Right, right. Well, I want to close this interview. I first off want to thank you for your service to our country, and I want to thank you for your participation in this program.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. All right, this is Dick Veasey. That picture was taken the day after I was discharged from the Navy. This will be on June 20th, 1946, and it was taken in the backyard of my family home at 5 Windsor Street, Haverhill, Massachusetts. This is the ship that Dick Veasey served on during the Second World War. This photograph was taken by a Marine Corps photographer during the battle at Okinawa when we were at Caramaretto, which is just off Okinawa, and this picture was taken in June of 1945. 1097. Again, this is Dick Veasey at the signal bridge on the light as a signalman. I don't recall when it was taken. It was probably taken at Pearl Harbor after the war. But it's on LST 1097 at my battle station and at my usual watch station. This is Dick Veasey and Ruth Veasey on our wedding day, April 18th, 1953, in Brooklyn, New York.